Dan, a former soldier who is now a teacher, is meant to assist his wife Emmy and his daughter Murray with the celebration on Christmas Eve 2022. Instead, he's on the phone trying to submit an application for his ideal lab job, but he's unfortunate since it's turned down. Dan joins his daughter on the couch after she had an angry outburst outdoors and tells her to do what no one else will. After that, the family is watching a crucial soccer match when all of a sudden, a bright cloud of smoke and lightning emerges on the pitch, and people start emerging from it. They are headed by Lieutenant Harte, who explains that they are from the year 2051, and they appear to be soldiers. These troops are come to beg people to go to the future with them and aid them in fighting the battle because an extraterrestrial race known as the White Spikes have invaded Earth and killed out the majority of mankind. As the months go by, nations from all over the world send as many warriors as they can, but it seems like it is never enough because the future continues requesting more people and only 25% of those who go return. The government starts enlisting citizens to battle when they run out of trained soldiers. Because many people feel they shouldn't be sent to a conflict that doesn't affect them, this leads to protests in the streets. Dan keeps on his teaching career, but his pupils don't seem very interested in what he has to say since they don't see the point if they're going to die anyhow. Martin is the lone exception. He is a volcanophile who always wants to talk about them. Dan's phone alerts him to a crucial notification at that precise moment. He has been drafted. Dan visits the military institution where he undergoes a series of tests that reveal he will be eligible to take part in the battle because he will pass away in 7 years. Dan is informed that the metal gadget they have attached to his arm will allow them to follow him in the future when he suddenly experiences a terrible feeling there. The gadget will get him home after 7 days of traveling. Dan then goes to give Emmy the news, and she thinks they should leave right now. Emmy encourages Dan to speak to his dad, whom Dan hasn't seen since he was abandoned as a child, while he points out that he can't get rid of a government tracker. Dan visits his father James to ask for his assistance, putting aside his pride for the benefit of his family. James believes Dan was sent by the government to spy on him, and a fight develops. Dan is ultimately forced to depart with the gadget still fastened to his arm. To break the awful news to his family, he goes back home, but he also makes a pledge to return. The following day, Dan visits the training center where he makes friends with Charlie, a chemist, and Dorian, a warrior who is returning for his third draft. Before receiving a thorough explanation of how the time travel technology operates, they get basic training that includes firearms and first aid. A river can only flow between those two sites, and the time link is comparable to two rafts on a moving river. Because those are the fixed spots, they can only move between 2022 and 2051. They are unable to make a decision before the conflict. Later, when the trainees are relaxing in the barracks, the alarm goes off, signaling that it is time for them to depart. The trainees are perplexed since they were meant to receive 7 days of instruction, but they are informed that the future cannot decide when it is necessary for assistance. Once everyone is present, the time link is turned on, and a cloud similar to the one that formed during the soccer match starts sucking everyone into the future. They are intended to travel to Miami Beach, but at the control room, the output coordinates are incorrect. Many of them perish quickly as the group crashes upon a building after emerging from the sky just above the city. The surviving group members are able to escape by swimming out after falling into a pool. When the squad looks down at Miami, it discovers that it is in total disrepair. They are at a loss for what to do when a colonel contacts them and tells them that soldiers are going to attack the city because white spikes have taken over. The group's objective is to free a captive research team from a lab. Dan is in command of the team since the colonel knows he has military expertise. Dan leads the group around the city, showing them the appropriate way to walk while they search for devastation and death everywhere they turn. When they enter the lab facility, they find a dead alien, so Dorian steals a claw as a prize. The research crew is located farther within, but they have all been killed by an extraterrestrial trap. The colonel orders them to quickly collect every copy of the material since the jet fighters are closing in and the white spikes will return if there are any bodies in the area. The squad hastily gathers all the required goods before beginning their ascension downwards in the quietest manner possible. They do, however, ultimately learn what white spikes look like when one of the boys hears a commotion and looks up. The crew opens fire as soon as the alien launches a spike from one of its tentacles, killing one of them. The aliens hurry down the stairs and discover an exit passage despite the fact that their gunshots don't seem to be able to penetrate their thick skin. Dan waits in the back to protect the crew while the aliens murder and kidnap several of them en route. He uses a flaming axe to fight because his bullets are ineffective, and he can't use them. The crew learns from Dorian that the creature's neck and belly are its sole weak points, saving them from certain death. The crew flees through the streets as several white spikes pursue them until they come upon the tank that will save them. Sadly, the tank is attacked first by the white spikes, who end in destroying it. Now, the team's only option is to combat the aliens while also looking for cover. The survivors are forced to flee inside a tunnel as the squad continues to lose members to the alien onslaught, and Dan stops to save one of the trainees who has fallen. Due to the delay, 2 of the trainees opt to remain behind and serve as an alien shield while the rest of the crew flees. The planes eventually show up at that point and bombard the entire region. Dan and Charlie awaken in a forward operating post in the Dominican Republic some hours later. They locate Dorian, who informs them that the other members of the squad have died and chastises Dan for stopping to assist a fallen individual when doing so put everyone else in risk. Dorian acknowledges that he has cancer and has learned that he is the one who determines when he passes away. When Dan is asked to visit the colonel, their conversation is cut short. Dan is astonished to learn that the soldier referring to her by her last name is an older Murray. She became a scientist as she matured and currently serves as the Air Force chief researcher. Murray says that she brought Dan to meet her father once more but that she really needs his assistance with something and that's why she seems so cool and collected about him. She then plays him the clip of a white spike that seems different. They only encountered male aliens in the city, but this one is female. She is more scarce, more hostile, and builds her nest underground. Because it looks like their only concern is the survival of their species, the male white spikes will die to protect her. The poison Murray developed is included in the explosives the military uses, and so far it has been successfully killing the male white spikes. Murray requires Dan to join the extraction crew in order to catch a female white spike so that she may be investigated because the female extraterrestrials survived the poison. They're hoping to create a more potent poison that will eliminate the aliens' primary means of reproduction. Murray recounts what occurred to Dan as the crew prepares to depart in helicopters. In 2048, the aliens suddenly appeared in Russia and managed to escape detection by radar and satellites. They ruled the globe in just 3 years, and they don't care about material things, they simply want to eat people. Dan wants to know what happened to him before he passed away, but Murray advises against going there. They arrive at the nest shortly after and see several troops attempting to restrain the female white spike. The alien, who is enraged, starts attacking the troops and kills several of them. Murray joins them and strikes her in the neck with a clean shot, allowing the others the time to surround her with extra rope and prevent her from fleeing. When an alien female becomes trapped, she calls out to summon her guards, and soon the area is overrun by aliens. Dan descends and fires at as many aliens as he can before joining the others in the nest to assist save his daughter as the female tries to assault Murray. Together, the troops get the woman into the cage into the helicopter. But now that they are trying to save her, the men are attacking the helicopters as well, even causing one to crash. In order to give the helicopters a chance to flee with the cage, Dan and Murray sprint to a vehicle and begin shooting at the aliens. The 2 of them then leave the location while driving quite quickly. When they get at a beach to send an SOS flare, Murray chastises Dan for acting hastily. Although Murray doesn't believe him, Dan says that he left the family when he was 12 because the despair of not achieving his goals hit him hard. Dan only wants to protect her. Murray was present at the hospital when Dan passed away following a vehicle accident when she was 16. Dan is speechless because he cannot believe he has resembled his father, and Murray is devastated by everything that has happened. He suddenly thinks that he may comprehend James's claim that the battle left him mentally in a bad place. The time machine is brought to a protected offshore oil platform with the female white spike. Every hour, she receives a massive dose of sedatives while being shackled. Together, Dan and Murray examine the alien's DNA in an effort to learn how she prevents the toxin from killing her. When it requires a lot of labor and takes them many days, it also gives them the chance to reconnect and converse more amicably when they share meals. The night before he must depart, Dan assures Murray that her mother would have been proud of her as well. Dan attempts to convince Murray that she needs to relax and to give him more work because, after all, he is supposed to be here to assist. Murray uses the opportunity to finally explain why she sent him here. He needs to take the stronger poison back in time to mass produce it and get it ready for when the aliens show up once she figures out a method to create it. She has to complete tonight, so she is working really hard to get it done before he departs. Murray argues that the only reason she phoned Dan was because she is the only one she can trust, and Dan doesn't want to abandon her to her fate. The machine eventually completes a poison with a 100% match for a female white spike at that precise moment, but it's also the time the alien awakens and summons her guardians. Dan believes they should murder the female to end the attack as a group of male aliens approach the platform, but Murray points out that they only have one sample of the poison and that it could have been more useful in the past. Murray and Dan try to make it to the helipad where Dan should be for the time jump, which will go place in a few minutes, while the troops start to defend the platform as best they can and other aliens smash into the labs. Even if the two of them kill several aliens along their path, Murray is still hit by a spike. Dan attempts to assist her in walking, but she is in too much agony, and the platform is on the verge of collapsing due to an alien ship that slammed into it. Murray tells Dan she loves him and apologizes for being cold to him before giving him the poison and pleading with him to take it back to save everyone. Dan jumps after Murray to help her as an alien suddenly appears and takes Murray down with it. The time link then transports Dan, Dorian, Charlie, and the others back in time when the time machine switches on at that same instant. Thank goodness the bottle doesn't break and the poison is secure in Dan's hand. Charlie says he's okay but that he hid like a coward. Hart brings terrible news. The time machine is no longer functional, most likely as a result of the aliens on the oil platform destroying the other end of it. Dan informs Hart that they must mass-produce the poison and send it into the future to kill all the aliens. It's over since they can never return, thus everything is over. Dan goes home and is still in disbelief at everything he has been through when he finally gets to see his family again. He continues checking on Murray to make sure she's still alive since he can't sleep at night. Dan reveals what transpired with the elder Murray when Emmy checks on him, and he is still committed to finding a solution. They know that aliens invade Russia in 2048, but no one witnesses the spacecraft arrival, and Emmy helps him understand the information they have. Perhaps that's the year they decide to move, but they may already have done so. Since it's in the midst of a freezing wasteland in Russia, no one notices. They must thus begin by looking at earlier years. The next day, Dan gets to work right away. They take Dorian's prized claw to the lab Charlie works at after he tells Dorian that this isn't done yet. Charlie verifies that the claw has silt that appears to be volcanic ash that originated in either China or Korea. They need to see a volcanic specialist because they do not comprehend how Asian ash may get up in Russia. Dan then visits Martin, one of his students, who informs him that there was a massive volcanic eruption in Asia thousands of years ago, and that if the ash had been carried by the wind, it may have been stuck in Russian waterways and turned into ice. This implies that the organisms have always existed on Earth and have been hidden from view by hundreds of layers of ice. They awaken in 2048 because that year sees the full completion of the melting of the polar ice due to climate change. They present their notion to the government, but because they have no supporting evidence, they are not awarded the funding necessary to locate the alien nest. Dan knows just the appropriate person to help them carry out their unlawful plan: his father James, who has been living off the grid for years and has a plane. Despite how absurd the quest seems, James agrees to aid when he hears Dan declare, "I need your help." Dan also makes contact with Hart, who previously collaborated with Murray and is prepared to do the task assigned to her by her loving boss. Hart travels with a few soldiers, a ton of weaponry, and several extra doses of the poison. Charlie pledges that he won't hide this time as the crew heads to Russia. When they get to the Academy of Sciences glacier, they start scanning the area for any unusual signs. They come to a halt as they realize that a strange magnetic field is encircling them and causing their devices to malfunction. The team uses a lot of explosives to dig a hole in the earth and enter an old cavern, where they eventually come across the frozen spacecraft. Dan warns them against entering the ship since it is exceedingly hazardous. They could go to the government and provide their evidence, but everyone agrees that it is up to them to put things right because the government has been ineffective. The squad enters the ship after cutting through the ice with a chainsaw, leaving Charlie and James outside in case anything attempts to escape. When the gang enters the cockpit, they find that the aliens never intended for Earth to be their final destination. Instead, this is a crash site. Unexpectedly, the pilot's body isn't a white spike. When they enter a different compartment and discover the genuine white spikes hidden within a number of biopods, they learn they are cargo, bioengineered animals that the pilot's extraterrestrial civilization employed as colonization weapons on other worlds. As they start injecting the toxin into the pods, the crew observes the white spikes writhing in agony, indicating the toxin kills them. Their shouts, however, also awaken the uninjected aliens, forcing them to burst out of their pods and assault. Although the crew fires as many shots as they can, some of them manage to get away. Dorian offers Dan his claw and agrees to stay behind to detonate the bomb once everyone has left since, as he puts out, they have no option but to blow up the ship. James starts firing at the escaping aliens, but Charlie's gun jams, so he starts chainsawing the creatures. Hart and the others are surrounded by a massive alien colony while Dan escapes and warns them to flee. Dorian sets the bomb off out of a lack of patience, taking down every creature with him and passing away according to his wishes. James says he saw an alien with a red belly flee, but Dan, Charlie, and James leave the tunnel before the explosion strikes them. They separate to pursue her once Dan understands that is the female. When the Queen comes upon one of them and attacks, it turns out that James set up a snowman clothed in garments as a trap. Dan shows up to run the Queen over with his snowmobile, but she chases after him instead. Then the father and son start firing while pushing the Queen down the cliff. However, they prepare for her return knowing that she is not quite dead. When the Queen attacks once again, she pulls them apart, shoots a spike at Dan, and then pursues him. Dan stabs her in the mouth with the same spike, and James takes advantage of the opening to strike her with an axe, rendering her blind. Dan seizes the opportunity to inject the venom into the Queen's leg as she starts tossing around in agony. To prevent the poison from spreading throughout her body, the Queen removes that leg. Dan prepares a grenade to take the Queen down with him when she attempts to pursue him. James extends his damaged hand at that precise time so the alien will smell blood and follow him. Dan climbs on the Queen and uses Dorian's claw to sever her neck since he won't let his father go now that they are back together. He kicks her a few more times before extracting the final vial of poison and placing it in her mouth. He then kicks her over the cliff once again. The Queen ultimately perishes after colliding with a large boulder. The government tries to claim credit for an explosion in Russia that killed a number of aliens the next day, which is reported in newscasts all around the world. James is finally given the opportunity to meet his granddaughter when Dan returns home and reunites with his family. Now that they can